Well, welcome to another week of the Brazos Sports PrepsCast. I'm Alex Miller with our Eagle High School sports writer, Abigail Ochoa. This is week 9. Wow, week 9
Woo!
of the Texas high school football season. And we've got small schools still in the heart of district play, and we've got some big schools that they're starting district action this week. Two schools here locally, Rudder and A&M Consolidated, they are starting District 10 5A Division II play. We are going to have Zach Taylor. He is the play-by-play voice of the Rudder Rangers. He also works at WTAW. He's going to be on here in a bit to preview that district and talk the Rangers. They're looking to break through this season. They're off to a 4-0 start. So, Abigail, how are we doing
Hey,
today? It is Wednesday afternoon. For those listening,
it
we're
is.
recording it now.
Doing so good today. Another week of week 9. It's going pretty fast here, Alex. I don't know about you.
It's
It's
going
going.
really fast. Well, we better talk really fast because we've got a lot to go over.
That's
So
true.
let's just get to it. Let's look
All
back
right.
last week. Let's start with A&M Consolidated. They finished non-district play with a road win over Willis, 21-0. Offense. They didn't really have the fireworks that we've seen this season, but hey, I think the Tigers are probably pretty satisfied with how their defense played. I mean, you get a shutout, that's about as good as you can do.
For
So
sure.
no turnovers. They had just one penalty, and Consol seeing progress in areas. So that's definitely a good sign for the Tiger defense heading into district play. But the offense, not their best night, but we've seen it throughout non-district play. They can put up points. They've got playmakers. They've got a variety of dudes that they can go to make plays out in space too. So,
Yeah.
what do you think about the Tigers heading into district play, Abigail?
Yeah. I mean, last week it was kind of, I'm sure it wasn't ideal for them to kind of only, it was 21-0, pretty low scoring for them offensively than what we've seen this past season. But their defense, I mean, if they haven't proved already that they're good, they proved it last week. I mean, against Willis, holding them there. Even Lee Fedora said that they won the game for them. There was no doubt about that. The offense had a little bit of trouble. They couldn't score when they needed to. They were forced to throw more and not see Lake on the ground maybe so much as he has been in the past just because of Willis's defense. But they didn't have any turnovers, which we talked about has been a problem for Consol. So that was good to see. I think maybe going into district that they were able to have no turnovers, just one penalty. So they weren't like challenged or pushed back in that way, as we've seen this season. So I think they still look good. I mean, obviously, you want to see your offense put up more than that, but I think they still look good, and they're still going to be one of the top contenders in the district. With Rudder and Huntsville and Lamar Consolidated and all those other teams.
For sure, and we will get some preview on Consol. They're playing the other Consolidated in the state, Lamar Consolidated, this Friday. We'll preview that here in a minute. Let's keep rolling. Brian, how about the Vikings? They come back after missing 2 games with players that had COVID, and they win their district opener against Harker Heights. I'll be honest, I wasn't expecting that, but that's a big win for the Vikings. A game that they needed to win, and all of a sudden they're 2-0 and they've got a little momentum, but it gets pretty big here pretty quick.
Yeah, they proved all of us wrong, which, like, what's new? But they played really good against Harker Heights. We've talked about how, like, teams coming back from COVID, how maybe it can be hard. They only had 3 days, I believe, or maybe even 2, because I think they started on Wednesday to practice for last week against Harker Heights. We saw what they could do with that little bit of turnaround. Ross Rutherford, obviously, he's been in the business forever, and you kind of saw that he was able to lead them to this win again. You still got Malcolm Gooden, who can run, who could catch, who could throw. He's kind of their all-around guy. You got Hunter Vivaldi, who had a few touchdown receptions for them. So that was kind of good to see. The defense also, we talked about them last week. They played a good against Waller as well. This week, they came out again. They were challenged a little bit by being out on the field for long periods of time. A lot of snaps there, but at the end of the game, they protected 3 pass attempts to the end zone. That Parker Heights was trying to get ahead there at the end, and they were able to stop them. I believe Cal had one of the deflections or whatever. So we've seen that defense do some really good things only in week 2 for them, which is nuts because they're already in district now. But they look really good. I mean, you got a big win over Parker Heights. You got to have some confidence this week.
Yeah, and they're going to get a big challenge this week going on the road playing Temple. We'll get to that here in a minute. Abigail, the game you were at last week, College Station, they bounced back with a win over New Caney Porter. What'd you see from the Cougars in their victory on last Friday?
Yeah, Dalton Carnes, which we've seen him do a few things this season. But this game, he really came out and showed it. I blinked in the first 13 seconds of the game. He was already in the end zone with an 85-yard kickoff return. And then, literally 7 minutes later, Huff found him in the end zone again for a touchdown. So they got that momentum going quickly, which I think last week when they played Magnolia, we saw they couldn't really get in a groove, and it took them a while, and they relied on field goals and things like that and their defense. So it was really good, I think, for them, especially to see their offense get going so quickly. They were up 14-0 with 5 minutes to go in the first quarter, I think. So anytime you have that, it's pretty good. They did have pretty quick possessions. They weren't on the field that long, I don't think. Their defense was, with Porter's offense pretty much the whole time on the field. But they were still able to come out on top. Their defense, again, we've talked about them before. They had a shutout earlier in the season in non-district. They looked good again on Friday. They proved that they could win a game and hold a team like Porter, who really knows how to run the ball, but it can also throw with their quarterback. But they showed a lot of jumping around. They were really aggressive. You can tell that they wanted it. They wanted that win, and they were going to fight for it. They pressured the quarterback really well. You just saw them kind of, I don't know if it was more confidence or maybe just wanting to win this week, but you really saw them be more aggressive and really, really try to push plays to end. So, and they also took advantage of, penalties and mistakes that Porter made. And those are big when you get to district, especially if you can come out with a win based on those.
Absolutely, and that's a big win for College Station, trying to get back on track after that district opening loss to Magnolia on the road. A couple more quick hitters. Brenham, they beat Georgetown Eastview. The Cubs, they're 2-0 in their district. They had to fight to get that win over the Patriots, a 28-26 win. Steven Stackhouse had a big game, dual threat guy. Offense, they've got a couple of playmakers with Cameron Richardson and Lopez at running back. Defense had a big game. So the Cubs, all of a sudden, they're looking to make some noise. They were co-champions in that district last season.
Yeah, you talk about their offense, Alex. Their offense played great, but their defense came up really big. 4 interceptions in one game and 1 for a touchdown. Aiden Villatoro had 2 of those interceptions, and he returned 1 for a touchdown. When you can get that kind of, pressure on another team, it looks pretty good for you. So they did really good on that front. Their offense was able to come back and come up big for them. They won by 2, so pretty tight, close game. But I think it's good for them to see that maybe this early. They'll face Bastrop this week, which we saw Rudder play in week 1. I think Brenham will have similar success this week against Bastrop. I don't think Bastrop has won. I think they've only won 1 this season. So I think it'll be good, though, for Brenham. They'll get maybe a couple of wins before they get into, later in district when they play Cedar Creek and Leander Rouse and tough teams like that.
Yeah, the outlook is definitely bright for the Brenham Cubs. They definitely that's a big win for them last week over Georgetown Eastview. So, Finally, Centerville. They beat Groveton, and it sounds like the Tigers have kind of flipped the script with what they're doing on offense. Brant Roberts, he threw for 200 yards, 3 touchdowns. He had an interception, but 45-yard touchdown pass with 1 second left to get that win over Groveton. And we know Dylan Denman, he is a threat out wide. They hit him downfield. They throw a screen to him and let him make a play out in space with a defender or 2 on him. He had 158 yards and 2 touchdowns. But, man, what a tight win for the Tigers. And, they kind of had a tough couple weeks after that loss to Bremont. And it was kind of like, man, is Centerville going to get this turned around? They had to fight back to beat Alta, who's still winless. But, that's a big win for the Tigers beating Groveton. And now they host Grapeland this week. And, Grapeland, they were 2-0. Norman G beat them pretty soundly, but this will be another stiff test and this will be a key game for seeding purposes in that district.
For sure. I mean, to get that win, literally 1 second on the clock, that's crazy. Dylan Denman is a guy that makes the plays for them. So it was good to see, you got Roberts coming in with that big touchdown throw. You got Phillips. All 3 of these guys almost had 200 yards. I mean, Denman had 158. So he's the lowest one, but then you got Brant Roberts at 203, you got Phillips at 203. These guys are putting up big numbers. It looks really good. Like you said, obviously they're going to host Grapeland, which that'll be a tough challenge for them again, especially after having these 2 tough wins. You got Alto and Groveton. They were able to win, but still pretty tough, pretty tight games. And it'll be interesting to see how they play against, a team that is coming into the game already, 6-2 like they are. So pretty level teams there.
Well, I think we've covered our bases looking back at last week. So up next, we got Zach Taylor looking ahead to Rudder and A&M Consolidated starting District 10 5A Division II action this Friday. Well, welcome back to the latest episode of the Brazos Sports PrepsCast. We got Zach Taylor. He's the play-by-play radio voice of the Rudder Rangers. He's joining us right now to preview the District 10 5A Division II. Rudder and A&M Consolidated, they're starting district play, and both of them, they got high hopes. Consol's the defending district champions, and Rudder's trying to break through for that elusive first playoff bid. So, Zach, thanks for taking a few minutes to talk to us. How you doing today?
Good, guys. How are y'all?
Doing pretty good. Ready to talk some football.
Good. Always.
Always.
Yeah, so, Zach, I guess, first of all, let's just look back at last week. Rudder, they barely got by Lockhart, who hadn't won a game this season. They won by 10 on the road. It sounded like Rudder had a lot of penalties, and they were down early, coming back there in the second half. Is that something that's kind of troubling you see going into district, or was it just kind of an off week for them?
Yeah, the unsportsmanlike conduct penalties, I think it has to be a little bit troubling. That being said, last week, and I know the officials are human too. Look, they're not going to get every single call right, but the officiating, there were quite a few questionable calls made on the night. I mean, Rudder had 3 touchdowns called back because of penalty, and one of those had Keith Ron Lee, who is arguably their star player, makes the catch. He's running into the end zone and kind of takes the long way into the end zone. Well, they call taunting. They say that it was at the 4-yard line. So they reverse the touchdown. Then they move Rudder back 15 yards from the 4. So suddenly they're at the 19-yard line now trying to get back in the end zone. So I'm not going to say that they were without fault on all the penalties or anything like that. But, boy, there were a lot of yellow flags out on the field. And Lockhart, you talk about Lockhart being winless, but they had come close in a couple of ball games. San Marcos, they lost on a last-second Hail Mary touchdown pass. And so they've got some pretty good players, some pretty good athletes in Lockhart. And Todd Mabus, who's a coach, was at Abilene Cooper for quite a few years. And He's there now at Lockhart in his second season. So, I mean, I wouldn't say the Lions are going to go winless the rest of the year. But, yeah, it was a good ball game, 47-37, and Rudder's 4-0 for just the second time in program history.
Yeah, and I think it's no secret that the Rangers team starts with E.J. Izar and Keith Ron Lee. You know, what have you seen from that kind of combination, and how good can this Rangers offense be?
It can be pretty dang good. One thing that they might not have is that bell cow running back. DJ Wallace, who actually plays defensive end for them, has been the most promising out of the backfield. But you've got a quarterback in E.J. Izar who can tuck it down and run with it. Keith Ron Lee, they use him on a lot of jet sweeps. But this offense, what you're used to seeing on 7-on-7 is kind of what's on display on Friday nights with them. I mean, they did very well in the limited 7-on-7 action that they had. Of course, we know COVID kind of played havoc with the state tournament, but Rudder was able to play in a tournament. They did very well, get some really good competition. And I think when they're at their best is when plays break down, when Izar has to scramble out of the pocket and he's looking, and it's backyard football again. And the great thing about Keith Ron Lee, and I think that's what's really distinguished him amongst his peers or separated him amongst his peers, is his ability to catch those 50-50 balls or even 25-75. I mean, there's been a few times this year where EJ's thrown it up in a double coverage and number 5's come down with it. So that is a lot of fun to watch, just those guys throwing the ball around. And Rudder's got some pretty good other receivers too. I'm not gonna forget about Milton Mooring and Marcus Stiles. Those are two guys, two veterans that have really come on. Jackson Brown's another one, Michael Lister. So Rudder has definitely got some weapons on offense, and I think they can hang with anybody offensively.
Yeah, we've seen the offense really kind of come out in the end, and even when it's a tough game, kind of win it for them just by their, ability to use Izar, to use Lee, to use Stiles, like all the people that you just mentioned. We've seen their defense kind of struggle in a couple games this season, but still offense is able to come out. Do you think, even though the offense is pulling off these wins, is that going to kind of work later on when you get to the district? Then you got Huntsville and you got Consolidated, who also have strong offenses.
Well, that's the big question. I think we're going to find out a lot this Friday night because Rudder's taking on one of the best defensive teams in the state, I would argue, in Huntsville. Definitely has one of the best defensive lines. So what's going to win in that case? Is it going to be offense or is it going to be defense? But defensively for Rudder, I think that is something they're going to have to keep an eye on, especially in the secondary. Their run defense is actually fairly good, but in the secondary, much like Texas A&M, believe it or not, they do have some issues, but they're very opportunistic in that they can get some turnovers when they need to get turnovers. I mean, they basically sealed the win last week with an interception from Marcus Hurd. They've had a few other opportunities where they've been able to pull that off. Keith Ron Lee, we've already mentioned him. He'll play both ways a lot of times. He will be in there at defensive back, and he's made some plays. So I think while the defense is not their strong suit, definitely, I think that they do have the ability to create some big plays and come up big when it matters.
Yeah, and I guess just looking at the district as a whole, Zach, a lot of the same teams from the last go around, these last 2 years, they lose Katie Paytow, who made the playoffs last year. They add Fulshear. Who are kind of the contenders in this district, and how much does Rudder benefit from losing a team that made the playoffs? And, there's one less team in the district, so that means there's one less team that's left out of the tournament at the end of the season.
Yeah, it was actually kind of fun to watch Pato in the last couple of years because their first year of varsity ball, you're thinking, oh, these guys aren't very good. Of course, they only had juniors. And then suddenly you turn around and, they are a full-fledged team. I mean, they were really, really good. But, yeah, A&M Consolidated is always going to be the standard bearer, I think, in most districts that they're at. And coming into this year, the Tigers were pegged number 1 again. Big surprise there. Coach Lee Fedora's got those guys rolling. The offense has been rolling with Kyle Willis and Sutton Lake back there in the backfield. And even though that they lost a lot of big-time playmakers, I mean, they really did. They lost a lot of talent. They're still able to reload down there at Consol. So I think that's big. And I talked about Huntsville. Huntsville is 3-0 on the year, and I don't know if they've kind of snuck up on folks. They played only 6A teams so far this season, and they've beaten all 6 of them. Their latest one over Humble, I believe, was a close one. But again, I mentioned their defensive line. It seems like every year they restack that defensive line. They've had a lot of big-time recruits coming out of their line, and they're good again this year. And Huntsville is definitely a team to watch. And then the Montgomery schools, Lake Creek, I think, much like Katy Pato, is finally coming into its own because it's a new school. And so those guys are finally coming around and getting the experience that they need. And so I think Lake Creek is one to watch. And then Montgomery with Bryce Bowling, who is their quarterback. He's now, I believe, a senior. And they've got a ton of talent on that Montgomery team. I mean, they were kind of a team to watch last year. I know that they ended up having to forfeit a game, and there were a bunch of other things that went on in 2019 for them. But I think the Bears are really a team to watch as well coming out of that district.
So, Zach, I guess the question is this the year that you think Rudder can make it through and break into the playoffs for the first time?
I really think so. I've been doing play-by-play for him. I was trying to think about this the other day. It's been like 6 years, I think, and now I'm my third head coach with Coach Eric Izar. But, I mean, they have the kind of talent on offense. I really think that they can hang with anybody. Those guys have a little bit of a swag about them, which has been few and far between at Rudder, and they have some stability, which has definitely been few and far between. So, I mean, talent-wise, this is the most talented Rudder team I've been able to see. And I think, you've got some other teams in there like Lamar Consolidated, Houston Fullshear's another one, and even some of the Montgomery schools I think have kind of taken their lumps early on. So it really is where the rubber meets the road when you start district play. I think we'll find out a lot about this Rudder team come Friday night, but I do think this is the year that the Rangers do, in fact, crack into that postseason.
Gotcha. And, we kind of touched on A&M Consolidated already a little bit, but I guess just kind of expanding on them, what have you seen from the Tigers? And like we said, they had a lot of pieces to replace, especially on the offensive side, some big weapons at wide receiver, but it seems like the Tigers, they haven't skipped a beat. What do you think is kind of the ceiling for Consol as they head into their district slate, trying to defend their district championship?
Well, I haven't seen the Tigers play in person just because I've been doing a football game every Friday night they have been.
Right.
But, I mean, the fact that Sutton Lake has really kind of come into his own as their running back, and he's been getting it done on the ground. And I think a lot of folks were wondering about Kyle Willis. How is he going to fill the shoes left by Gage Paul? Is he going to be able to pick up where he left off? But he's been looking awfully good. I mean, he's been putting up some great numbers. And obviously you have a championship caliber coach in Lee Fedora who definitely knows what he's doing. So it seems like every year, at least for these past few years since Fedora got there, that Consol has been able to reload even after losing a lot of talent on both sides of the ball. And, losing a few D1 receivers last year. I mean, my gosh, you got to somehow bounce back from that. But they really have been able to kind of come back in their own. Now, the only game that's really given them trouble this year was against San Angelo Central, which was a 6A team and mainly a run-heavy team. And so I wonder if when Consol faces up against those teams that just have a bruising running back that decide that they want to run the ball 30, 40, possibly even 50 times in the ball game, how that's going to work out for them in the long run. But I think right now Consol's the team to beat in the district, no doubt.
Gotcha. Well, looking at this matchup on Friday, Rudder, they're hosting Huntsville. And we all know that was a game that Rudder wasn't able to win last year, kept them out of the playoffs. First of all, how much do you think they want to win that game? I mean, I know that's got to be one that's on their minds, even if they're not trying to make any game bigger than it is.
Oh, they definitely it's big. And talking with Coach Izar, he's very well aware that they've never made the postseason. It's something that's brought up every year, something that he brings up to his players every year. And he said this season, their motto has been something to prove. And so they still don't feel they've kind of got that chip on their shoulder. They still don't feel that they're necessarily as respected as they should be, but they also feel kind of like they're that underdog, and they're coming in, they're looking to knock off the big dogs. They're trying to prove themselves each and every week. Now that they're 4-0, I think they've kind of got that swagger about them. They've got that confidence, and it really will be a fun game to watch, I think, because both teams are so good at maybe what the other ones well, not necessarily what the other one's weakness is, but their strengths match up with the other ones very well. And that Rudder has this great offense and Huntsville has this great defense. Which one of those is going to win? But yeah, I think that Rudder is going to go into this ball game. You're going to be at home. Things are starting to cool off a little bit. Hopefully, fingers crossed, things will feel like fall weather in Texas. And it's going to be a lot of fun to watch. I think it's going to be a great ball game.
Yeah, I remember being at that game last year, and it kept them out of the playoffs. They were very, pretty upset as anybody would be after that game. They only scored once in the second half, so I can imagine that there's a lot of buildup to this week. Starting off district this strong, and kind of having to come out and show it. But like you said, Zach, I mean, their offense is really, really finding their groove and really looking good. Do you think it's going to be? How is this matchup going to look similar to last year, or is it going to look completely different, maybe just because what we've seen from Rudder so far?
I think it will look somewhat different because those guys in EJ Ezar, Keith Ronley, they're a year old. Well, everybody's a year older, except for the folks that have graduated. But for Rudder, they've got a lot of upperclassmen now, and they've got some depth. Now, the offensive line has not had a test like this yet. So that I'm really going to keep an eye on the offensive line and see how well they're able to block these big Huntsville defensive linemen, because that is going to be a chore in and of itself. But the good thing for Rudder, I think, is they have a mobile quarterback, and they also have the ability to make things happen when plays break down. And so that can be a blessing without a doubt, but it can also be a curse because you've kind of got a gunslinger, so to speak, and EJ Ezar, who says, all right, well, I've been throwing it up to number 5 all season. He's been able to go get it. Well, eventually that's gonna bite you at one point or another. You're going to end up having an interception, and that's happened once or twice so far this year. It's really happened. Keith Ron's come down with it more times than not, but just the intricacies of that battle, especially up front in the trenches, is going to be something to really watch. Whether or not it's going to be a lot like last year, I don't know. From what I can remember, was it a rather low scoring game? Is that what it was?
I believe it was I think it was 38-14.
Yeah, something like
that. And
that.
they went into
halftime on one side. Yeah.
Yeah, they went down at 31-7 at halftime.
Yeah. And it was just kind of it was all she wrote from there in the second half. And I don't know if Huntsville has the offensive power like they did last year. They've got a new quarterback in A.J. Wilson, who's pretty good. I mean, he's a nice little dual threat quarterback in and of himself. They got a nice junior running back. So I'm not saying that they don't have any weapons at offense, but right now I think Rudder and Consol have the two most dynamic offenses in the district. So I don't know if Huntsville will be able to put up that many points. They haven't yet so far this year. Mm-hmm. I'm kind of guessing it's going to be a game somewhere in the 28-21 range, something like that. So maybe you say 50 points would be your line there. But it's going to be a good ball game nonetheless.
Yeah, you mentioned kind of the offensive line a little bit. I talked to Clayton Sikorsky, who's the offensive tackle for them, and he's one of the only returning starters this year. So they're pretty young there as well. So it'll be good to see them have a challenge this early.
Yeah, you mentioned Clayton. He's a guy that can play on both sides of the ball as well and has at times this year. But their offensive line. Honestly, we haven't talked about them a whole heck of a lot, and that's a good thing. Because generally, when you're not talking about the offensive line, that means you're not talking about giving up a bunch of sacks.
Yeah, and something's going right.
Yeah, and it does help that you got a mobile quarterback back there as well in EJ Ezar, and he's a pretty sturdy dude too. So he's kind of like in the Sam Ellinger mold a little bit, maybe a little bit smaller, but he's not afraid to mix it up and running the ball. And so, yeah, the offensive line, without a doubt, will have its biggest test Friday.
All right. Well, Zach, I think that's all we got for you today. Before you go, how can our listeners tune in to the game Friday night to hear you on the call, and where can they find you on Twitter?
Yeah, absolutely. Gospel 97.3 FM is the station that we're on, as well as RadioAggieland.com, Brian Broadcasting's company website. You can go on there, and we actually have a list of all the teams, and you can just click on the Rudder Ranger logo and listen in. So 97.3 FM and RadioAggieland.com. And then you can follow me on Twitter at Zach Taylor Sport, just the singular sport. Apparently I didn't have enough room for sports. plural. So just Zach Taylor Sport. You could follow me there. And then, of course, I'm also on the Infomaniacs Monday through Friday on WTAW. So on that Monday morning, 6 to 9 on 1620 and 9. Well, my gosh, we have too many stations to remember. 1620.
Too many numbers.
News Talk 60. Hold on. I'm trying to say it out loud because I have to say it every day. And if I do say it, then maybe I'll get the thing right. 1620 94.5 WTAW. There you go.
There we go.
Ooh,
Zach,
goodness.
thanks again. And yeah, we'll check back in with you maybe later this season on how the Rangers are doing.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thanks, Zach.
All right. And coming up next, Abigail and I, we're going to look ahead to the biggest matchups in the area this week. All right. Welcome back. It's our final segment. We're looking ahead to the biggest games around the Brazos Valley this week. We've already touched on the Consol Tigers, but they host Lamar Consolidated this Friday at 7:30 at Tigerland Stadium. You can check theeagle.com to catch my feature on Consol defensive end, Eric Goodman. He's leading the team in tackles. He's already got like 58 tackles on the season and over 10 tackles for loss. So you can read about what's working for Eric over there at Consol. Well, Abigail, let's look ahead to some of these other matchups. We've also touched on Rudder, so let's move to Bryan first.
Okay.
Because this is a big game for them. I mean, they're going on the road. They're playing Temple, and this is going to be their biggest challenge of the season, easily, without question.
Yeah, instead of going from like 0 to 100, they're going from like 100 to 100. I mean, you got Harker Heights last week, tough game as well. They were able to come out with a win. Then you got Temple this week on the road for the first time this season, I believe, that they won't be at Merrill Green. So yeah, Temple and Bryan both had wins last week, opened up district like that. Temple, they kind of started off hot in the first quarter. I believe they put up 24 points last week, and they kind of solidified it in the fourth quarter. So we've seen Bryan kind of have to come back in the second half and really pull through. We saw it against Waller. We saw it against Harker Heights. I don't know if that's kind of how they want to do this game. I would assume that against a tough team like Temple, you really, really want to get on the board pretty quickly, and not have to rely on your defense or even your offense kind of coming up with the win in the second half. So I don't know about you, Alex, but this will be another good one for Bryan. I think if they're able to come out with this win, I mean, it's going to be pretty impressive. I would imagine that they would have a lot of confidence if they were even able to do anything against Temple.
Absolutely. A win over Temple would be monumental for Bryan, and that would really change the outlook a lot of people probably have on Bryan.
Yeah. And they'll have more time to prepare this. I mean, they'll have a full, week or whatever. Last week they only had 2 days. So we saw what they could do there. So we'll see what they could do with a full week.
For sure. Well, we've got some Thursday night football action. Abigail, I think you're going to be out there. College Station, they're hitting the road. They're playing at New Caney. New Caney's coming off a bye week, and they've won 10 games the last 2 seasons. College Station coming off the big win over the other New Caney school, Porter. That's given the Cougars a little bit of confidence. What are you seeing in this game heading into Thursday night matchup?
Yeah, Thursday night football, high school edition. It'll be fun to get out there. But looking at New Caney, maybe even just their past 2 seasons, they've gone 10-1, 10-2. But then they played Porter this year, and they only won by 2 points. They had a 2-point conversion, I believe, even the first touchdown that they made, and that really kind of solidified them winning at the end just by those two points. College Station, we've seen their offense. We saw them struggle against Magnolia. They were able to come out with a win against Porter last week by kind of striking first and early. But I think we're going to kind of need to see it all come together. It's always in the past few games, it's been like a couple people. It's been, last week it was Carnes with the 2 touchdowns. And then Roderick Brown also had he had a 1-yard touchdown as well. So I kind of want to see, Collins get in there more. I want to see Brown and him have maybe more rushing yards this game. Get some of those, you got, those receivers and things like that. Maybe the passing game coming up a little bit stronger in this game, I think will be important for them. Their defense has done really well. I think they just need to keep going in the direction that they're going. Like I mentioned, they seem to be more aggressive and more kind of like flying all over the place, which you like to see. So, New Caney wasn't able to be, or they were able to beat Porter. College Station was able to do it pretty easily. So it'll be interesting to see these two teams come together. But I think if College Station's able to kind of find the groove early on offense, get their guys going, the guys that they've counted on, the past few years, they'll be good to go if their defense continues to do what they're doing. Special teams is also looking good for them. So I think they're just going to need to all kind of bring it together for this win. And it'll give them, 2 consecutive wins in district, which is always big, especially against 2 teams that are new.
Absolutely. I think a win over New Caney would go a long way for College Station this week. And you look at the road ahead. College Station's got a bye week after this game. And then who do they play? They play Lufkin at home. That's the one team they haven't been able to beat the last 2 years. And Lufkin, they're beatable this year. They've dropped their first 2 games against Magnolia West and Magnolia. So you've got to think the Cougars have a chance in that game. And so having 2 weeks to prepare for Lufkin kind of in the middle of your season, a win this Friday would go a long way in the Cougars' trajectory for the rest of the season for sure. Well, a couple of big games on the small school levels this week. First, Franklin, they're hosting Buffalo. Franklin, they've won 5 in a row, and they are undefeated in district play. But Buffalo, this is going to be a tough test for the Lions. Buffalo is unbeaten this year. They haven't lost yet. Went to the playoffs, made it to the 3rd round last year. Last week against Florence, Franklin ran all over them. I think they won 63-6, somewhere around there. Big game on the ground. They've got multiple dudes. They got Bobby Washington, Marcus Wade, Seth Spiller, Hayden Helton. They got some dudes out there in Franklin. And so, Abigail, how pivotal is this game for Franklin as they come down the home stretch at district play?
Yeah, I think it's really, if they come out with a win or even if it's a tie game, I think that's going to show something. I know I picked against Franklin a couple of times this season. They played some really hard teams that they were able to get out and, really kind of run over. Lexington was one of them. I don't think anybody really saw that coming, especially how Lexington was playing in the beginning of the season and with the people that they have. So Franklin's really done it. I couldn't even remember that they won 5 in a row, which is nuts. They haven't lost since losing to Cameron in week 2. So, this team is really rolling and they have the guys to do it. It'll be a tough matchup against Buffalo. This will be a real challenge. Last week they won 63-6, I believe, against Florence. This week's going to be completely different. I don't see them scoring as high as they have in the past few weeks, but they do have the guys to do it. Obviously, they have, like you said, Washington, Marcus Wade, Helton, and of course Spiller on the ground. That guy's hard to stop when he gets going. He always gets yardage. It's just really hard to defend him. But they look really good. It'll be good either way, I think, for Franklin, whether it's a tight game or whether they win, it'll be big.
Yeah, I think what helps Franklin in this one is they're battle tested. They lost a tough game to open the season against Lorena. They kind of got beat pretty well by Cameron Yo, who we all know year in, year out is a power. Right. They got the big win over Lexington. So the big game isn't something new to Franklin. And so, getting Buffalo at home, I think that definitely helps. And so this is going to be a really big game up in Robertson County on Friday night. And I'm really curious to see who comes out victorious. That's going to be a really close matchup if I had to pick.
Me too. Yeah. They haven't had an easy road, that's for sure. But this will for sure be another hard one for them.
And so our last game of the week, Navasota. They are going on the road to Cuero. I was out in Navasota this last Friday.
Yeah.
They pulled away in that fourth quarter against LaGrange. Darius Randall, I mean, he ran all over the Leopard defense. Navasota, they kind of had a hard time getting a groove, but then in that fourth quarter, it was run the ball, give it to Randall, and let him go. That guy, he's got some wheels, and he is a big playmaker. But now, Navasota, they're going on the road. They're playing that big game on the road against Cuero, and they dropped their game against Giddings last week in a really tight matchup. So, the Gobblers are looking to get back in the win column. And if you're Navasota, this is big because you look ahead. If Navasota can win this week, they remain unbeaten in district, and everything's pointing toward that regular season finale against Giddings at home. And man, what a big game that would be to close the year. Rattlers versus Buffaloes. But you got to go through Cuero first, and that's no easy task.
Yeah, I think they end the season with Gonzalez and Giddings. But like you said, they have Cuero this week. I know you were there, Alex, at the game. I'm curious to kind of see what kind of went wrong maybe in the first half, just because we're so used to seeing this Navasota team kind of, come out pretty strong. So I'm interested to see kind of, was it not clicking? Was it offense? What was not working, do you think?
Yeah, Navasota, they were playing LaGrange. LaGrange was without their starting quarterback, and so they had to put their backup in. And LaGrange they ran on the legs of their running back, DJ Taylor, and he busted some big plays early. And, if I recall correctly, Navasota, they had some turnovers there in the first half, but they were able to recover, and they put it together there in that fourth quarter, which was big. And I mean, closing a game, they won by 3 scores, but they were down 1 going into the fourth quarter. And so, being able to pull away like that's pretty big, especially get down the stretch of the season. You really find out what your team's made of. And those are the kind of momentum swings and the responses that, if you're a coach, you want to see from your team, especially when you're hoping to be a playoff contender.
Yeah, especially in this tough district. I mean, Navasota's not getting easy ones thrown at them, but they've weathered the storm so far. And again, against Cuero, you mentioned kind of going into playoffs. Obviously, the past 2 years, they've been they've gone to the area round, played Mithalone and Heritage both years and lost. This year, I know it's too early. We're not even done with district, but I really think that this team has the chance to go even farther this year. They have the guys. They have Randall, DeMar, Jesse. I mean, with that combo alone, you're pretty good. Being able to win by three scores, and going in tied in the fourth. Those guys have the legs, and they, Jesse can throw. So they're looking good.
I had to pull up my game story from last Friday. I could not remember, and it's all coming back to me. Navasota, they had a hard time on special teams in that first half.
Okay.
They fumbled a punt return. I was like, man, they fumbled. How did they fumble? It was in an odd way.
Yeah.
And they fumbled on a punt return. LaGrange, they converted a fake punt and scored a touchdown a few plays later. And then at the end of the half, Navasota, they had a perfect 2-minute drill, scored with 15 minutes left in the half, but then they missed the extra point. So they were down 1 going into halftime. So, Casey Dack, he told his team, let's not panic. Let's regroup. We're still in it. Third quarter was scoreless, but they grinded away and found a way to pull it out in the end. It's information overload.
I know. There's so many teams, so many weeks. No, I totally get it.
But I had to get it right. I was like, I know this is a little off, but I knew I was on the right track. So.
Good. I'm glad we got it right there. But you can't. There's special teams, we've talked about before. They can win or lose games,
Yeah, and they Navasota's got a pretty good kicker. So, I mean, he can drill it. So, well, Abigail, I think we've covered everything. So,
I hope we talked fast enough.
I hope we did too, because we had plenty to discuss.
Yeah.
Well, before we go, where are you going to be this Friday?
So I'll be College Station at New Caney on Thursday. So follow me as well. Abigail Ochoa 88 on Twitter, and then I'll be at Huntsville at Rudder on Friday. Well, Zach will also be there. So yeah.
All right, and I will be here in College Station. I won't be traveling all over the Brazos Valley.
There you go.
First time staying in town, I'm going to be at A&M Consolidated. They are hosting Lamar Consolidated in their district opener. And Rich Kroom, he'll be providing updates from Temple as the Bryant Vikings take on the Wildcats. So we'll have you covered. Follow us at Brazos Sports. Follow us on Twitter at Abigail Ochoa 88, at Alex Mill 20. That's 2 L's in Mill. And check theeagle.com for all the latest updates and scores. Send us scores. We love to keep track of everything that's going on Friday nights, so that we have plenty to discuss next week, and we can keep track of the teams we're not able to see with our own eyes on Friday nights.
Yeah.
And
sports@theeagle.com.
sports@theeagle.com is our email. Send us in stats, send us in Player of the Week nominations. Like and subscribe our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Watch our video on theeagle.com. We love doing this. Thank you all so much for support and just tuning in each week. We really appreciate it. And Abigail, you got any final things?
No, we got some features this week. I'm doing a feature on Rudder's Clayton Sikorsky. I might be saying this wrong, but I said it twice in this podcast. So I hope I didn't butcher that. Really cool offensive tackle from Rudder. Good guy. He's a captain this year, so I have some thoughts about how Rudder's doing so far. I know, Alex, you have Consol?
Yes, on Eric Goodman. So defensive end for Consol, their leading tackler. And in Thursday's paper, I will have a district preview looking at Rudder and A&M Consolidated. So be sure to check out what Leif Fedor and Eric Izar had to say about what they like about their team, what they're looking to improve on, and what their outlook on the district slate is.
Yeah.
All right. Well, tune back in next week for another week of the Brazos Sports PrepsCast. See y'all later.
Bye.